Good to see everyone this morning. I encourage you to take out your Bibles and turn to Numbers 13. This will be our first reading this morning in Numbers 13. Coming out of the meeting, I'm still really excited about it, and I feel like I'm a lot more zealous than I was when we started. And those of you that came here every night, I appreciate you, and I know God appreciates you for putting first things first. Something that me and Mr. Brian were talking about, and he mentioned it, I think, Tuesday night, is one thing that really came good out of that meeting was the discussion after. And I feel like there wasn't a night that I didn't get with people or get with brethren, or even a few times. One time get with someone who wasn't a brother or sister and just talked about what had just been talked about. And really I feel like Mr. Brian, if he didn't just edify us, obviously here at the building, feel like the Word of God continued to edify us as we continue to provoke that thoughtful discussion about Scripture and about the Word of God. So, of course, I want to be thankful for him, but, of course, thankful to God for allowing us to have something like that. This morning, I'm actually extremely enthusiastic about what I'm going to preach this morning. I've been excited about this for a while. I think this is going to be a great sermon, and I think it's going to do a lot of good. And it's just a way to look at things a little bit differently than we have before, or what we don't immediately think about when we think about what's going to be preached in a Sunday morning sermon. I have been talking and thinking about the giants for a while now, especially in the Old Testament, obviously, and the way that God intervened with them and the way that God sent his people to take care of them, and how it's just weird to think that giants in the ancient world actually used to be like a legitimate problem. Like, well, I don't want to go over there. Why do you want to go over there? Well, there's giants live over there. I ain't going over there. It was just a legitimate problem that they had to deal with. And so God, when he's working with his people, he sends these people often to go fight against these giants. And God's saying, I want to get rid of them too, and I'm going to use you to get rid of them. And these people, of course, had to develop a faith to be able to trust God enough to go up against these giants. To go up against something that was not supposed to be killed, designed to be killed, and yet God's going to use them as an example to increase our faith and increase the faith of the people that he was working with during these times. This sermon is about faith. And especially coming out of the Romans class in the back, that's what we've been talking about. And I just think more and more that this was a great example of the way God expects us to have faith. He expects us to have faith that can kill giants. And we see throughout the Old Testament, at one point the Israelites know how to kill giants, and then they forget, and they have to relearn how to kill giants. And then the next generation is able to kill giants because they've learned from the previous generation. So we'll be looking at that and just handling this chronologically. At the end of this sermon, I just have 3 thought questions that I want to take home with us. And maybe we can provoke more of that thoughtful discussion after. So if we were just looking at this chronologically, we started in Genesis. When's the first time we hear about giants? We hear the first time about giants in 6:4. We see that giants are born from the intermarriage between the sons of God and the daughters of men, as it's worded word for word out of my version there. There's a tradition, of course, that says that the sons of God here were the angelic beings that came down and they intermarried with the human daughters, and that's why they had these giants. I just cannot hold on to that kind of traditional belief. It really does not sit well with me at all, especially when I think about when Jesus says in Matthew 22:30, for the resurrection, answering the question about the Sadducees saying, who's your spouse going to be in heaven? Jesus' response says, for in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given into marriage. Meaning that when we go to heaven after the resurrection, there is no more marriage. There's really no more male or female. That distinction is an earthly thing that doesn't exist anymore. And to clarify, after explaining that, he says this, but are like angels of God in heaven. There is no marriage because you'll be like an angel. And so kind of that traditional argument that the sons of God here were angels doesn't sit well with me because of what Jesus says in Matthew 22. The reason why people go to that belief is because we see in Job 1 that angels there are called the sons of God. And that's fair, and I think that's a fair argument when you're thinking about Job 1. But as well, if you read Luke, Adam is called a son of God, and Seth is called a son of God. We go to Galatians and Romans, you and me are called sons and daughters of God as well. And of course we have Jesus Christ, who is called a son of God. Lots of people were called sons of God. So let me propose this to you about Genesis 6:4. I think that this was the intermarriage between the line of Seth and the line of Cain. And that Seth were going to be the people that claimed to be the sons of God. And Cain's line were going to be the people that say, no, we don't want to claim ownership to God. We'll just be the sons and daughters of Cain. And I think that intermarriage between the righteous line of Seth and the unrighteous line of Cain is what produced these giants. But regardless of what you believe in this is when we see the giants first come to be. It's one of the leading causes for God to say, I'm going to flood the earth. These people took over. They were men of renown. They became in charge. They were doing evil, wicked things. God says no more. He floods the earth, and he only spares Noah and his family through the ark, through their obedience by their faith. We look at Numbers 13 is the next time we see the giants. We see the sons of Anak. We're not told who Anak is, but we are kind of jumping to the story here, and he just kind of expects us to already know who Anak is, which we don't. But evidently, this line of family were giants. The sons of Anak were all giants. We look at Numbers 13. The spies have been sent out into the land. This is the first generation. They've been sent out to see if they can take the land, what's in the land, after being freed from Egypt. Pick up in verse 31 here. This is the spies' report back to Moses and to the people. Verse 31 of chapter 13 says, But the men who had gone up with him said, We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, The land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people whom we saw in it were men of great stature. That we saw the giants, the descendants of Anak, came from the giants. And we were like grasshoppers in their own sight, and so we were in their sight. So these people come, the spies come back, they see the children of Anak, they see the giants, and they come back and they're like, we can't take this land. Now keep in mind, God had just delivered them from the greatest empire that had ever existed till then, Egypt. He keeps them alive all the way to travel in this land. He's about to give it to them, and now all of a sudden they're like, no, we can't do this. Well, why were they had this sudden fear? Where did this come from? Well, it's because they saw these giants. And of course, we ridicule these people for their faith here, which, we're going to continue to do that. I think that's the point here. However, they were giants. And I feel like we try to at least get that aspect in our mind. These people were terrified of these people, and for good reason. These people are big people. Big people that want to kill you. How are you going to react to a giant? You're going to react the same way. You're going to be terrified. This was a terrifying experience. However, God's trying to give us such a faith that can overcome that terrifying experience. And that's what he expects out of his people. That's what he expects out of us today. Only one spy here in this section comes back and says, we can take him. And who is that? That's Caleb. If you look at the first verse, verse 30, before our reading, it says, Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, Let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it. Caleb, however, says, you know what we should do? We should quickly go ahead and take it now, because we are well able to overcome these giants. We're well able to overcome all the things that are going to face us in the promised land. And that was because of Caleb's faith. It's interesting if you ask the question, who was the first person to show courage and faith against the giants? Usually our answer is David. Well, David was the first one to show courage against the giants. However, recorded in the Bible, of those that are recorded in the Bible, that's not true, is it? The first person to show faith and courage recorded in the Bible against giants is Caleb. Caleb's the one that starts this tradition. And he says that we can take him. Now, not only does Caleb have the faith to stand up against the giants, who else does he have faith to stand up against? It's his peers. Verse 31 through 33 is the answer of the spies ridiculing Caleb and saying, Caleb, you're wrong. We can't overcome them. Caleb, you're trying to get us killed. And so the ridicule coming out from his peers is what Caleb his faith has to stand up against. If you know the movie, you know the movie, but I love this quote. It takes great courage to stand up to your enemies, but it takes greater courage to stand up to your friends. Caleb's faith wasn't just so strong that he could stand up to giants, but Caleb's faith was so great that he could also stand up to his peers and say, no, you're wrong. And I think when we think of maybe modern day giants or modern day ways that we have to show the same faith that Caleb did, I think this is where it comes to application really serious for us. Are you standing up to your peers? when they're endorsing wrong, when they're blaspheming God, when they're doing all these evil things and they're trying to get you to be included in that, do you stand up to your peers and say, no, I can overtake this? Because if you do, you're going to have the faith that can kill giants, like Caleb did here in Numbers. The next time we see the giants, the people leave, of course. God, because of Caleb's faith, rewards Caleb and says, you're going to live to be able to take care of the land. God kills off the next generation by time and brings the next generation close to the promised land, and they're about to take it. Now we get to Deuteronomy 2 when we see the giants return again. Probably the same group of people just 40 years later. And the people are about to take the land. Moses is still alive, but Joshua's kind of coming into more of his role. In Deuteronomy 2:20, we see that the Ammonites start meeting these people here and have a name for them, and he calls them the Zazuman. Just to go ahead and give a fair warning before we go any further, there are some hard words in this sermon. There's a lot of people's names. I want to say them right because they're real people. They really lived. A lot of them had really great faith. I'm not trying to disrespect them in any way. The problem is that I've got a website I can go to, and you have these Jewish rabbis that tell you the right way to say these names. You also can get some, Bible audiobooks, and they'll tell you the right way to say these names. You also got good old Southern Christians that'll tell you the right way to say these names. They're all different. So I'm going to do the best I can, but if you can take this with the understanding that I'm doing the best I can with these names as we read this, and try to see the bigger point past the pronunciation. Deuteronomy 2:20, the people have come back. They're getting close to the land. And it says in verse 20, they also regarded as a land of giants. Giants formerly dwelt there. But the Ammonites called them the Zazuman, a people as great and numerous and tall as the Anakim. But the Lord destroyed them before them, and they dispossessed them and dwelt in their place. Now these are a different group of people than the sons of Anak. And I think this is who they were tall as the Anakim is talking about. He's talking about the descendants of Anak. He says these people were just as big as the descendants of Anak. The Ammonites call them the Zazuman. But what does God do? As the people are entering the land, they're coming back about to enter the land. God sets a standard. God destroys them. You see these people? Remember your older generation, your parents were afraid of these people. Let me show you something. They're gone. Why? Because that's the power of God. And this is what your faith's going to do. As well as God destroys them, they dispossess them and dwelt in their place. God gives the inheritance of these giants. He gives their fields. He gives their houses. He gives their food, all to the people of Israel. You get to move into their house. You get to enjoy the things that they've labored for because I'm giving it to you as a gift. Now you think about this from a logical perspective. How much did a giant normally eat? Probably a lot. How big was a giant's house? Probably big. How much animals would a giant been able to take care of? Probably a lot. So when you get to move into his house and have his food and have his animals and sleep in his room, what's the state of your estate? It's probably pretty big. And if you think about it from that degree, God gave them the giant stuff. It was probably a lot of that good stuff that God's trying to give them. And even the more reason why God's getting them to possess the land from the giants. Just something I was thinking about in this. The next time we see this, we continue on, is through Joshua and Caleb. Deuteronomy 3, we just turn one chapter over. More of Joshua and Caleb taking a lead on this one. We meet King Og, who probably was much taller than Goliath. In chapter 3 here, if we look in verse 1, it says, Then we turned and went to the road of Bashan, and Og, king of Bashan, came out against us, he and all his people, at the battle of Edrei. And the Lord said to him, Do not fear him, for I have delivered him and all his people and all his land into your hand, and you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon. So the Lord our God also delivered into our hands Og, king of Bashan, with all his people, and we attacked him until he had no survivors remaining. So think about the difference between what we saw in Numbers 13 and now in Deuteronomy 3. We're working with a totally different group of people, aren't we? And what do these people have that the previous generation did not have? These people have faith. And that's why they're able to King Og. That's the reason why they're able to destroy all the people and attack him until he had no more survivors remaining. We're given this last little nugget of information in verse 11 about how big King Og was. It says, "For only Og, king of Bashan, remained with the remnant of the giants. Indeed, his bedstead was an iron bedstead. Is it not in Rabbah of the people of Ammon? 9 cubits is its length, and 4 cubits its width, according to the standard cubit." Now, to be fair, this is King Og's bed. This isn't himself. But what we can say about this, King Og had a big bed. Just a second, we're going to talk about the height of Goliath. King Og was probably 4 feet taller than Goliath. That's how big he was. You're just thinking about the bed, maybe kind of around that way. But it being that big, is God, did he slow down by King Og? No, he destroys them, and he gives the people the land. Now Joshua and Caleb taking more of a lead. We go into Joshua 11, and we see Joshua continue this tradition. We kind of read these more quickly. I want to get to David. Joshua 11, verse 21, it says that Joshua finally meets the Anakim, the children of Anak that we talked about back in Numbers. It says Joshua 11:21, "At the time Joshua came and cut off the Anakim from the mountains, from Hebron, from Debir, and from Anab, from all the mountains of Judah, and from all the mountains of Israel, Joshua utterly destroyed them with their cities. None of the Anakim were left in the land of the children of Israel. They remained only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod." Joshua goes in, and Joshua's people are able to destroy all the descendants of Anak except for in 3 places, in Gath, Gaza, and Ashdod. For our sake in our story, the one city is more important than the others for our sake, Gath. Gath is a place that Joshua leaves alone, and that's going to come back up in 1 Samuel 17. We see in Joshua 15:14, Caleb as well drives out the children of Anak. In Judges 15:14, reading this quickly, verse 13 of chapter 15 of Joshua, "Now to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, he gave a share among the children of Judah, according to the commandment of the Lord to Joshua, namely Kirjath Arba, which is Hebron. Arba was the father of Anak. Caleb drove out the 3 sons of Anak from there, Shishaiah, Iaman, and Talmai, the children of Anak. Then he went from there to the inhabitants of Debir. Formerly the name of Debir was Kirjath Sephar." And this, as well as when this story is repeated in Judges 1:20, is the last time we have recorded of the Israelites of this period killing giants. This is it. Joshua does it, Caleb does it, and then it's over. And we have a large amount of time of silence when giants, even though still living in Gath and Gaza and Ashdod, they're not talked about anymore. And we don't see anyone rising to the occasion to defeat them. This story here in Joshua 15:14 and Judges 1:20 is how we bring Othniel, by the way, the first judge. Othniel is Caleb's little brother. He helps him defeat the people in this area, and Othniel becomes the first judge of Israel. Then we have all 14 judges. Then we have King Saul, and the giants are going to begin to rear their ugly heads again. And guess what? The people don't know how to kill giants. Because that faith, that information, that faith that was supposed to be passed down, I think was lost. They forgot about it. It wasn't important anymore. They got rid of that faith, and the next thing we know, we meet a giant in 1 Samuel 17, and nobody knows what to do. However, ancestors back with Joshua and Caleb, they did know how to kill giants, but it's been forgotten. And I think there's just a small lesson here that we have to pass down our faith. And obviously, number one, we want to pass our faith down to our children. We want them to grow their own faith by looking at our example. Not even our own children, just the next generation of Christians. We have to instill them the knowledge of the gospel, the knowledge of God, that they can grow their own faith too, can't they? What can happen is you give us, right now maybe we're doing great, we have strong faith, we're doing great things. Give it 100 years and we don't practice those things anymore. 100 years later, the people here, maybe even at Gardendale Church of Christ, have no faith because we didn't teach it and we didn't pass it down. And the generation of the judges, before the generation of Saul, that's what they did to them. There was no more faith because you see what happens here in 1 Samuel 17. If you look at this passage with me now, 1 Samuel 17, this is the story, the account of David and Goliath. It says in verse 1, "Now the Philistines gathered the armies together to battle, and were gathered at Sokoch that belongs to Judah. They encamped between Sokoch and Azekah the Ephes-dammim. And Paul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up the battle array against the Philistines." Saul's king, and we have that the children of Israel are encamped against the Philistines. They want to go to war with each other, but there's this valley in between them we see in 1 through 3. Starting in verse 4, we meet Goliath. Goliath is a Philistine. He is from Gath, the city that Joshua spared, and he makes a deal with the Israelites. And that deal is that if you can send one of your guys to come and kill me, we will be your servants. You'll win the battle. We'll leave. You can take all of our stuff. We'll go home. We'll flee. However, you send your champion down and I kill them, well, then you're going to be our servants. And you're going to surrender, and we're going to take your stuff, and we're going to chase you down, and we're going to take over. And so this is the deal that Goliath makes to them. Goliath goes and makes this deal in the valley every day for 40 days. A little over a month. You think about this, you're a soldier, and every 40 days, every day for over a month, a giant comes down and says, "Hey, who wants to fight me? Who wants to fight me?" You know how the Israelites react to this? Every time he comes down, they flee. So you can picture all these soldiers, they're standing out there, they're in, their armor, they're here at battle, and every time Goliath starts walking down, where do they go? What, back into the tents? I guess. They run away, I don't know, but they flee and they're terrified. They don't even want to look at this guy. And of course, none of them volunteer. The reason why none of them volunteer is because his description here. Verse 4, "And the champion went out to the Philistines, named Goliath, from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He has a bronze helmet on his head. He was armed with a coat of mail. The weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighs 600 shekels, and a shield bearer went out before him." Goliath here, number one, we're going to go this backwards. He had a javelin like a weaver's beam. A weaver's beam is the way you make a quilt, right? You have this long rod and you have your blanket and you can weave and you can make your material off that blanket. Now obviously that doesn't work for many of us, but just to tell you, he had a really, really long stick for his javelin. What we see that I think we do understand is that his spearhead on that javelin was 600 shekels. And we kind of look at Babylonian information about the way they weighed things. This goes to around about 15 pounds. 15 pounds really is not that much weight. But if you take 15 pounds and you hold it out far from you, it becomes a lot of weight. It becomes a lot of weight real fast. Imagine holding a weaver's beam or this long stick with 15 pounds on the end of it. How long are you going to be able to hold that weaver's beam up? As well, this is not necessarily is a spear. The first time he describes it, he says it's a javelin. The difference between a javelin and a spear is a javelin is supposed to be thrown. So not only is Goliath this big guy with this big spear, but the spear is meant to be thrown at you. So now Goliath has this radius. If David didn't have faith when he approached Goliath, Goliath probably could have killed him as he was walking down the valley. But of course, that's not what happens. We see that his coat of mail that he's wearing, the weight is 5,000 shekels, and that's about 125 pounds. Now, maybe to us that work out, benching 125 pounds isn't that much if you're a guy of bigger size. Squatting 125 pounds really isn't that much if you're a big guy. But where is he wearing the weight of this 125 pounds? On his back. Do any of y'all do any back workouts? Maybe try to do a sit-up or something like that with 125 pounds on your back? If you want to go to the hospital, you will do that, right? That's where you'll end up. You'll end up in the hospital because you're trying to carry that much weight on your back. One time I hiked into Chi-Hall with my special backpack that's supposed to hug my hips, and put the weight more on my legs. I hiked in with 60 pounds. Half of this, less than half this. When I got on top of Mount Chi-Hall, I realized that was a mistake. So what did I do? I started dumping water out, actually. I over-prepared on water. Tried to eat all my food real quick, tried to share my food. Because it was too much weight. And of course, that was more on my hips, not on my back. And this was double of how much he was carrying. This is how big he was. When we see his height, it says it was 6 cubits and a span. We have a pretty good idea of what 6 cubits is. It becomes a little more tricky with the span. There's a lot of different sources that kind of give us different things, and that's why you have different heights for Goliath. What I decided to do is stick to the traditional 116 inches, a little under 10 feet. Me and Hayden came up here 2 Mondays ago, and we measured it. And we measured it from the stage, as if he was standing right here beside me. And Hayden had a ladder, and Hayden's trying to get the tape measure out, and I'm moving the computer PowerPoint red line back and forth to try to measure it out. This is where me and Hayden put it. I'm 6'2", especially with these shoes on. But this is probably how tall he would have been if he was standing right here, not on the floor right here. 116 inches of muscle. So can you imagine when he comes out every day for 40 days, are you going to be the person to volunteer and say, I'll go kill him? It takes great faith to be able to stand before someone like Goliath. Great faith. So as we see this story plays out, I'm going to leave this red line up here so you can kind of picture it more and more. When he comes out here, David has left to go take care of his shepherd. David's doing shift work. He has to work 2 jobs. He's Saul's armor bearer, and he's got to work at home as being the shepherd. So he runs home. He takes care of the sheep. His dad says, David, go take this to your brothers. Here's some food. He goes and he brings them some food, and he gets there, and he's like, what's going on? And his brothers retell what we've just talked about Goliath. And David says this. If you look here in verse 26, he says, and David spoke to the men that stood by him, saying, what shall be done for this man who kills the Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Who is this guy? Who is this guy who thinks he can defy the armies of the living God? Who is this person that comes and mocks God for 40 days and y'all letting him get away with it? They tell him the prize for defeating Goliath that Saul set forth is that you get great riches, you get to marry Saul's daughter, and here's a great one. Your father's house is exempt from taxes. You don't have to pay taxes anymore. But with all those wonderful blessings, these wonderful rewards, what does David care about? You're letting this giant defy the living God. That's what the problem is here. David says that he'll do it. He'll kill him. Eliab, David's oldest brother, gets on to him and just really plays out as a jerk here. Says, David, why are you here? Why are you doing this? You're just here to see the battle. And David gets angry and says, what have I done now? What have I done to you? And we have this little older brother, little brother getting on to each other about what we're doing right now. David says, I'm going to do it. Saul hears about it. Saul calls for him. Saul tries to talk him out of it in verse 31. But David responds like this in verse 32. Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. Saul says in verse 33, David, you're just in your youth, but this guy's been fighting since his youth. This is a mistake. But verse 34, David says, your servant used to keep his father's sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went after it and struck it, delivered the lamb from its mouth, and when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard, and I struck it and I killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. Moreover, David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. Verse 38 through 39, Saul tries to give David his armor. It was like, here, if you're going to go fight him, you probably should gear up and take this stuff. David walks around with it. He's like, I cannot move. This is way too big. It's way too heavy. I'm not doing this. So David takes it all off. Verse 40, David takes his staff in his hand. He chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook, put them in his shepherd's bag in a pouch which he had, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. So the Philistine came, drawing near to David, and the man who bore the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked and he saw David, he disdained him, for he was only in his youth, ruddy and good-looking. So the Philistine said to David, am I a dog, that you come to me with sticks? Like Goliath was this little dog, and you'll get this little dog off you by beating it with a little stick. But this is how David responds in verse 44. This is how the Philistine says to David. Goliath says to David, verse 44, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds and the air of the beasts of the field. 45, then David said to the Philistine, you come with me with a sword, with a spear, with a javelin, But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. The day of the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth. And the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Then all the assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's. He will give you into our hands. If you approached Goliath, and you were young, David wasn't a little kid, but he was young. You saw someone this big, would you go up to him and say, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to cut off your head. The Lord's going to give me your head, and then you're going to know, and all your army is going to know, and the whole assembly of Israel is going to know that the Lord considers the battles of his people to be his, and he's going to deliver you into my hand. He calls a shot just like Babe Ruth. He says, this is what I'm going to do, and the reason why I'm going to do it because I know my God's going to do it for me. That's faith. And that's the faith we see of David. David takes his sling, he throws a stone, and we know the rest of the story. He defeats Goliath. Later, he'll become king. He'll take Goliath's sword back and unify the people under Goliath's sword, saying, remember, I'm the one who had the faith to kill the giant. If we continue David's story and we fast forward, I want to skip this point. I'm going to come back to it. David's servants, 1 Samuel 21. Now David's an elderly man. He's fighting out in the battle, and now he has to deal with Goliath's brothers. And ever since David built his fame off killing the giant, now it seems like all the giants are targeting David. And they're trying to be the one to claim that I'm the one that killed David, like David used to be able to say, I'm the one that killed Goliath. In 2 Samuel 21, excuse me, I said this wrong. 2 Samuel 21, second book. Here, David is older in verse 15. It says, when the Philistines were at war with Israel, David and his servants with him went down and fought against the Philistines, and David grew faint. Then Ishbi-Benob, who was one of the sons of the giant, the weight of his bronze spear was 300 shekels, and was bearing a new sword, thought he could kill David. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, came to his aid, struck the Philistine, and killed him. Then the men of David swore to him, saying, you shall go out no more with us to battle, lest you quench the lamp of Israel. So now after Abishai has killed Ishbi-Benob, someone who's tried to kill David in his older age, David grows faint in the battle, and Abishai comes, he runs, he's obviously a younger man, one of David's servants, he works for David, he kills Abishai before Ishbi-Benob can kill David. And then Abishai tells David this. He says, we're going to swear to you this, you can no longer go out into battle with us lest you quench the lamp of Israel. David, you almost died back there. We're not going to let you go out to battle anymore because of this. I think there's a powerful lesson in this, and it has nothing to do with this sermon, but I feel like I need to say it. There comes a time where our souls cannot keep up with, our bodies cannot keep up with our souls anymore. And I think this is what's happening to David. I don't think David's faith is lacking here. I don't think that's the problem. I think God is seeing that David needs to take a different role in his life. He doesn't need the one that goes out in the battle anymore. What he needs to do is he needs to be someone that stays back and be the coach. And so I think in a lot of situations, we grow in our older years of life, and maybe we kind of get, obviously sad and reasonably sad because we cannot do the things that we used to be able to do. Do we still have a purpose? Can God still use us? Abishai says yes. He says you need to stay home from now on lest we quench the lamp of Israel. Even though David could not do the things he used to do, did he still serve a purpose? He was the lamp of Israel. His faith and his encouragement and him just being alive and be able to give his wisdom to the people that were working for him, under him, David still served a very important purpose. When we get to our lives, when our bodies can't keep up with our hearts anymore, our bodies cannot keep up with our souls anymore, we can still be a lamp to God's people. And our wisdom and our encouragement and our faith can still resonate and still work in people. We will still have a purpose, won't we? David is having to transition into this next phase of his life. It's not easy, but it is important that David serves this role as being the lamp of Israel. As we continue on reading, we see that lots of people kill a giant now. I'm not going to read it, but I put it up there on the screen. We see Sibbecai killed Saph, the giant. We see Elhanan killed the brother of Goliath. These are all David's servants. Then we see Jonathan, David's brother. David's brother is going to kill a giant. The giant's famous because he had 6 fingers on both hands and he had 6 toes on both feet. Now we have a list of all these people that have killed giants in 1 Samuel 21. So let me ask this question. What's the difference between 1 Samuel 17 and 2 Samuel 21? In 17, we have the armies of the living God. Goliath comes out every day, just one giant. Everybody's terrified. David actually has the faith to kill the giant. And what happens? He becomes a hero. They can't believe it. David just killed a giant. Now we've gotten to 2 Samuel 21. It's still a big deal when you kill a giant. But these men, they are not terrified. These men have faith. You've gotten a giant. You've killed a giant. You've killed a giant. You've killed a giant. We've all killed giants. Because David has taught them how to kill giants again. Because David is what? David has become the lamp of Israel. And I think about it in this context, what's the lamp of Israel? That's David's faith. David has influenced these people that they can kill giants too. His faith has taught others to have their own faith. And now we're all able to kill giants because David is serving this purpose as being the lamp of Israel. So what we saw at the beginning, if I go back to the beginning, Caleb and Joshua were a part of a generation that didn't want to kill giants. Caleb and Joshua rose out of that. They began killing giants, and their people, their generation followed. That information then was lost. That faith was lost. David has to step forth and be the first person to kill a giant again. And now we have his servants are going to follow in his footsteps and carry on that faith, that message of faith. That faith was taught. That faith was seen and exemplified through David. So here are my 3 thought questions I just want to leave you with. Just things to think about. Number 1, are you killing your giants? Are you actually doing it? Your giants are mocking you for 40 days. They're blaspheming your name. They're blaspheming God's name. Are you killing your giants? Are you taking care of your sin? Are you beating your bad habits? Are you killing your addictions of sin? Are you actually repenting and conquering your sin? Are you killing your giants? Or are your giants mocking you? Are you conquering your anxieties with prayer? Or you're letting your anxieties and your worries mock you and ridicule you for 40 days? Are you killing your giants? The second one is, are you teaching the next generation how to kill giants? Number 1, if you're like 1 Samuel 17, the older brothers of David, you're not even killing the giants. Are you teaching your little brother how to kill giants? No. If you're not killing your giants, do you believe your children are going to kill their giants? They may, but you're not helping them at all, are you? You're teaching them to live in a world of terror and fear of the world and of sin and of death. That's what you're teaching them. Are you being involved with the younger generation? Are you taking an interest in them? Are you helping them grow their own personal faith? Are you telling them about God? Are you telling them about His promises? Are you telling them about the prophecies that have been revealed that increase our faith? Are you teaching the next generation how to kill giants? The third and last question I have is, are you letting God teach you how to kill giants? Bring you back to David, and this is the point I skipped. David was not just thrown into Goliath all of a sudden. God expected him to handle it. David explains. First, there was a lion that came along, and God helped me kill him. Then there was a bear, and I caught him by the beard, and I killed him too. Did David have a man that was able to teach him how to do that? The last man we have recorded that kills giants was Caleb, lived hundreds of years before David. So what did God do? Well, God taught David how to kill giants. God sent trials and tribulations and tests David's way to increase his faith so that he too could learn how to kill giants. And I'm not trying to say this from the perspective of maybe something bad is happening to you. Maybe you're trying to fight a bad addiction, whatever you say. I'm not trying to think, okay, well, this thing that's really bad right now is just a lion. Goliath is coming later. I'm not trying to, cause that fear in you about that. What I'm saying is that, are you looking at your trials? Are you looking at your sin? Are you looking at those things as, God is teaching me how to conquer these things? And I need to accept God's lessons, increase my faith, and conquer these things, because God's not going to let me handle a temptation that I cannot flee. God isn't going to send a temptation in my way that I cannot conquer or overcome. Because God is working with us and He is cultivating our faith within us, similar to the way that Jesus did the disciples. If you need help with your faith, one of the best things that we can do, and some Jesus taught the apostles, is to ask for it. Ask the Lord, increase my faith. Think of two passages as we think about there's these giants, the spiritual, figurative giants that we're talking about. One is James 1:2. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. As well, 1 Peter 1:6. In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while, if you need be, you have been grieved by various trials, that the genuineness of your faith, being more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Are you killing your giants? If you are, you're bringing glory to Jesus Christ. If you're ignoring them, if you're ignoring these problems in our life, you're hiding from them, you're just allowing them to continue and to blaspheme God, you are not glorifying Jesus Christ. How about we have the faith to kill giants? And how about we actually go out and do it and teach the next generation to do it? If we're speaking about spiritual terms or figurative terms of what giants would be like, there were two giants that were so awful that the Son of God Himself had to kill them. He had to come down and He had to take them down. The first giant was sin, our sin. Jesus didn't kill that giant with a sling and a rock. He killed it with a cross. The other giant that was too big for us to handle, it's like all giants really are too big for us to handle without God, but this one was especially big, was death. And so Jesus, raising from the dead, He destroyed that giant. If there's anyone here this morning that has that sin problem and they need Jesus to help them kill those giants in their life, then Jesus wants to help you do that. If you need to come to the waters of baptism with faith, that's how that works, with faith, then we want to help you that right now. If there's anyone here that needs to increase their faith, and you want the prayers of the congregation, we want to help you do that as well. Please have faith and have the courage to step forward. If you will please come forward as we stand and as we sing.